Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well and staying safe. The Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is all over these PPP loans. And because there are so many changes that are happening so often, what we want to do is keep everybody as up to date as we can. So we're going to spend a few minutes here talking around some of the changes relative to PPP round 2. Next slide. So let's talk about this, okay? The timing of the application submission is really short. Anytime between right now and March 31st, your applications can be submitted. Some changes that have happened here. Understand what they're talking about here. This is round 2 of the PPP. You could be a first-time draw or a second-time draw. So you've got the round, which is basically the umbrella for what's happening, and the draw is your first-time borrower or a second-time borrower, okay? Draw 1, draw 2. First time, if you are a first-time borrower with the PPP program, you are optionally able to go in and try to get this loan. The loan cannot exceed $10 million, and you cannot have more than 500 employees. This is if you are a first-time PPP applicant. If you are a second-time or second draw PPP applicant, your loan will not be able to exceed $2 million, and you cannot have more than 300 employees, no matter how many locations you have. So if you are a franchise owner and you have multiple locations and you have 350 employees, you will not be able to go for round number 2. What are the terms of the PPP? You can choose between 18 and 24 weeks in order to spend the money once that money goes in your account, all right? And the federal government says as soon as the money hits your account, the clock starts. Our recommendation is choose 24 weeks because you can always spend it in a shorter period of time, but you can't spend it in a longer period of time. So if you choose 8 weeks and you haven't spent it all, and we'll talk in a second about how it has to be divided, you're going to be out of luck and you're going to have to owe that money back to the federal government. So our recommendation, always check with your CPA and your accountant and your tax advisor, but our recommendation is a 24-week period. Next slide. Okay, who is eligible to get round 2, draw 1, or draw 2? Well, who's eligible? Both first-time and second-time applicants, okay? Entities, though, who are not in operation on or after February the 15th of 2020 are not eligible for the PPP. So if you started a business, and you incorporated and you opened your doors and you were in business on February the 16th, it's too late. It's too bad. You can't do that. Anything on or before February the 15th, you will be eligible. Okay. The second time applicants, all right, must have used your round 1 PPP funds. So let me repeat that. If you are applying for a second draw in PPP and you got money the first time, you must have used that money, okay? You could have chose 8 weeks or 24 weeks, but the funds must have been used. Now, another change here is that if you are going for a second draw of the PPP, the initial PPP loan application approval number and the amount must be on the second draw application. A little kind of hiccup here now that's going through the federal government is even if you needed additional money for the second draw, you will not be able to get it. You can only get as much as you got in the first draw. However, you must have spent the funds and you must have included on your second draw application all the information relative to the approval number and the amount of the first draw. So just keep that in mind. If there is any overlapping, any way, shape, or form, in other words, you haven't spent all of this money, okay, which you're supposed to have spent, right? Just make sure that you have separate accounts set up for round 1 money that you got and round 2 money that you may get, okay, if that happens. You cannot combine these funds. It will be a nightmare for you when you go and you go to file your taxes, which is why we suggest that if you're going to get a second draw and it's approved and it's flowing through whatever financial institution, you make sure that you have a separate bank account set up for it. We also encourage you not to combine these funds with any other funds that you have, be they business funds or personal funds. Separate accounts across the board. It will be a nightmare if you don't do that. Next slide. Okay, who is eligible? Well, of course, corporations, okay, for round one or round two, all right? But PPP round two, first and second draws are really focusing on the small little micro businesses. The sole proprietor, the gig worker, the independent contractor are now not only all eligible, but are encouraged to come after this money, okay? So how would you know where you stand in this, okay? Like, how do I know if I'm an independent contractor, a gig worker, a sole proprietor, with or without employees? Well, they define it now in 3 different ways. When you're filing your taxes, if you're filing a Schedule C and you use line 31 to determine your gross receipts, you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor. If you are a filer of your tax returns and you use a Schedule F, okay, line 34 to determine your gross receipts, you are a sole proprietor, gig worker, or an independent contractor, okay? Also, anybody who's filing their taxes and uses Schedule F, as in Frank, to report your gross receipts as a total, you're an independent contractor, a gig worker, or sole proprietor. So again, really round two of the PPP is really focused on micro businesses, small businesses, independent contractors, gig workers, and sole proprietors. The money is sitting there. Go get it. Okay. First-time borrowers, this is the first time that you're asking for money, right? You do not have to prove anything in terms of a loss of funding in 2020 versus 2019, okay? You don't have to prove that you have a drop in gross receipts. And we'll go through the calculation in a second as to how you calculate what you're asking for from the federal government in this PPP loan. However, second-time borrowers, okay, you already got a PPP loan in sometime in 2020. Now it's 2021. You're going for a second draw. You do have to prove a 25% drop in gross receipts, and we'll go through that in the next slide. Okay, the calculation for first-time borrowers. If this is the first time you're going after a PPP loan, what you do is really pretty simple. There's a very simple loan application that's out there for you. And what it is it will be based on your average monthly payroll costs in 2019 or in 2020, okay? So you take your average monthly payroll cost in either 2019 or 2020, whichever is bigger, okay? And you multiply that average monthly. So you take those average monthly payroll costs and multiply it by 2.5. That's going to be the number that you're going to be asking for in terms of the amount of the loan on the PPP. Okay, so if you're doing it, remember what we just talked about. If you're a Schedule C or Schedule F filer, okay, line 31 or line 34, 2019 versus 2020, whichever number is bigger, use that number. That's the number that you want to go after, okay? However, if you're a second-time borrower whose NAICS code begins with 72, so you're somewhere in the hospitality industry, food service, restaurant, catering, etc., okay, you multiply your average monthly payroll cost by 3.5. Now, notice I didn't say 3.5 if you are a first-time borrower and you're in the hospitality industry. If you are a first-time borrower and your NAICS code, okay, starts with 72, you can't multiply by 3.5, you multiply by 2.5, okay? So it's a little bit of a change there, because what the federal government is saying is, for those people who are borrowing in the hospitality industry for the second time, we recognize if you're a micro business like that, you're probably gonna need a little bit more money. So you can go after that with the 3.5. Next slide. All righty, the funding scenarios. All right, now, this is a change that just came up because there were a lot of questions as to what if I wasn't in business for the full year of 2019 versus the full year of 2020? What if I don't have all the quarters? How do I calculate this? What do I do? Federal government changed this around last week, which was the inauguration week of the new administration. They changed this around last week as well. So remember, round two businesses are eligible only, okay, only if you're going for another round two here, all right, not round one. Round one, if you've never borrowed before, you don't need to prove this. If you're going after another draw, you want to get more money for the second time on the PPP, you have to prove that you have lost at least 25% of your revenue in any of the following scenarios. So hang in there with this. I'll be happy to go over it again. All right. If you were in business all of 2019 and all of 2020, all right, so you were in business as of January 1st of 2019, all right, what you have to do is take a look at your quarter to quarter 2020 versus the same quarter to quarter 2019. Any quarter, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 2020 versus 2019. If any of those calendar quarters were down by at least 25%, you qualify. Okay? Any one of those. Now, here's a new wrinkle, and it's positive, okay? Because some people are finding that their quarter to quarter wasn't down, but their year to year was down. So you can also take a look at year to year 2020 versus 2019. If you have a 25% gross receipts loss on an annual basis, you can also qualify for PPP round two. All right. So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two, let's assume that you were in business as of July the 1st of 2019. So not the first 6 months of 2019, but the last 6 months of 2019, and obviously all of 2020. How do you prove that? Okay, well, you take all of your quarter three or quarter four, third or fourth quarter in 2019, okay? And you can bump that up against any quarter in 2020, all right? So you take July, August, September, October, November, December, and then you bump that up against January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December of 2020. Any quarter in 2020 versus any one of those versus the third or fourth quarter in 2019, that will qualify. So it doesn't have to be the third quarter of 2019 versus the third quarter of 2020. It can be any quarter in 2020 versus those other two quarters in 2019. Take a look at it's the same scenario as if you were in business as of October 1st, 2019. So you take all of your fourth quarter, it's got to be the full quarter, versus any quarter in 2020, any quarter in 2020. 25% loss of gross receipts, you qualify, all righty? And then businesses that were in business as of January the 1st, 2020, you can take all of your first quarter versus quarter 2, 3, or 4 in 2020, a loss of gross receipts of 25% in any one of those, you qualify. So if you do nothing else, okay, sit down with your accountant or by yourself or with your financial advisor and take a look at these different scenarios, because what the federal government is trying to do is make it so that you can get this funding, especially if you're a small business, a micro business, a sole proprietor, or a gig worker, okay? It's set up here for you to be able to get it. So pay attention to these scenarios. Make sure you have your tax returns. Make sure you have your Schedule F and your Schedule Cs in front of you, and just play around with this. It's not going to be difficult to prove in some way, shape, or form that you lost 25% in any of those quarters. Next slide. Okay, we've talked about how to get the funding. We've talked about the restrictions around that, but let's talk about the use of funds in round 2. Okay, the use of funds in this round of PPP is 60% has to be used for payroll, okay, and 40% for other defined businesses. So let me go through this again. At least 60% of the funding that you get must be used for payroll and all those associated payroll costs, okay? That's where line 31 on your Schedule C and line 34 on your Schedule F come into play, okay? And again, Talk to your accountant, talk to your CPA, talk to your financial advisor. At least 60% must be used for payroll and payroll costs. The remaining 40% are used for business expenses, okay? These are going to include rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. Now, the nice thing is that the federal government has added 4 additional categories of expenses for you, okay? Now remember, you've got 24 weeks if you choose that, which we are recommending, to make sure that you've got at least 60% of your money going against payroll / associated payroll costs, the other 40% or whatever is left, that increment, going against at least 7 categories of expenses, right? So in terms of the additions that the federal government put on top of the rent, the mortgage interest, and the utilities, you now have the option of being able to have those funds go against any type of facility repair or modifications that had to be made to your business due to any type of civil unrest, public disturbance, etc. Okay, in order for you to have a working business. It also now includes the employee protection and business protection. So anything that you had to do to make your business PPP ready, so to speak. So personal protective equipment, hand sanitizer, plexiglass spacers, etc. This is money that can be used toward that. Any money that you use toward services necessary to work remotely, okay, like if you had to buy a new computer, if you had to buy new software to conduct your business, if you have to pay for monthly costs of cloud computing, etc. These are all expenses that can be utilized by the PPP funding, okay? And also the use of funds for any accounting services that you need or have needed to make sure that all of your business statements, your tax prep, and everything was all set up and ready to go. So the federal government has expanded that use. Okay, so seriously, take a look. You've got 24 weeks to spend it. Just make sure if you want this PPP loan to be forgiven, no matter what the amount, at least 60% is spent on payroll. All right. Once you reach that, you're golden. Next slide. Okay. The second round of PPP as well. We've talked about this, but let's do a little bit of a summary and then we can wrap up. So there are those rules for the first-time borrowers, and they are different for second-time borrowers. All right. As we talked about, first-time borrowers, you can get up to $10 million, but you can't have more than 500 employees, no matter how many locations you have. And you must have been in business, okay, on or before February the 15th of 2020, all right? The loan multiplier for you is going to be 2.5 of your average monthly payroll cost. That's for all first-time borrowers. Second-time borrowers, no matter what you got in the first one, you can only get up to 2 million here, okay? And not more than 300 employees, and no matter how many locations, and the same thing, business, in business on or before February the 15th of 2020, all right? The loan multiplier here, all right, for second-time people, if you are not in the hospitality industry, and therefore your NAICS code does not start with 7.2, your loan multiplier, if you are not in hospitality, is 2.5. If you are in the hospitality industry, any way, shape, or form, your loan multiplier is going to be 3.5 of your average monthly payroll cost. Again, because the federal government recognizes there are a lot of people that are in the hospitality industry that were significantly affected by COVID, okay? Remember, you must have used your first PPP amount, alrighty? And you must make sure that you put that information on your second loan application, okay? And remember, again, businesses who are coming back for the second round of funding, you have multiple ways of being able to prove that you have lost at least 25% of your revenue on the funding scenarios that we went over on slide 6 here, okay? So as long as you've lost 25% in any quarter or on an annual basis from 2020 versus 2019, you're good to go for this money and you should be approved, no problem. Next slide. In terms of forgiveness, okay, one of the things that becomes important is that you want to make sure that you have spent this money wisely with that 60-40 split we talked about, and you have spent it with the choice of either the 8 or the 24 weeks. Federal government is really being very, very specific about this. If you're choosing 8 weeks, that loan, that clock starts as soon as that money goes in your account. and you have 8 weeks from that moment to spend it. Okay, same thing with the 24. All right, that clock starts as soon as that money is in the account, and you have up to 24 weeks to spend it. All right, the split is going to be 60% to payroll and at least 60% to payroll, and the remainder, which is 40% or less, is going to the other expenses that we talked about. All right, remember, for it to be forgivable, that 60-40 split. In those expenses, you've got rent, mortgage interest, utilities, supplier costs, investments in changing your business around, keeping your business safe from a personal perspective or personal protective equipment scenario, software, business, you needed to run your business, cloud computing, accounting services, etc. Next slide. Now, this is another wonderful change that has been made, all right? And guess what? It's a little bit of a quote unquote double dip. So the CARES Act clarifies now that any company, all right, any individual, anybody receiving PPP loans, okay, will be allowed to deduct them from taxable income, okay, and any expenses paid for the funds received under the loan. So previously we were prohibited from making such tax deductions, okay? So therefore, the money that you come in, that's given to you from the PPP loan, whether it was last year or this year, okay, you do not have to declare that as income, okay? And on top of that, okay, the expenses that you needed where the money went to pay for those expenses for rent, mortgage, all the other expenses that we talked about here, they can be deducted from your tax return. Right? So thus, the businesses receiving these funds you're all going to be allowed to deduct these expenses as if they were used for non-PPP funds to cover these costs. Okay, so that's great. So you're not only getting money in, and you don't have to quote unquote declare it, but the expenses that you use the money for outside of payroll, you can deduct from your taxes as well. So that's a nice thing. Next slide. Okay, remember folks, the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is here to help you in any way that we can through this. We're happy to help direct you to CPAs that can help you, okay, to financial institutions that can help you, to lending resources and PPA guidance, whether it's through us or through the SBA, all right? We encourage you to not only check our website as often as possible, but also for the most up-to-date resources in both English and Spanish. The SBA has established the link here that you see. And of course, should you need to get in touch with us at the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, always email me. I'm happy to get back to you as quickly as possible. My email is kod'Connell@philahispanicchamber.org. kod'Connell@philahispanicchamber.org. We hope that you really take advantage of round 2 of the PPP. It's there for you. If you have a calculation of $150,000 or less that you're asking for, there is basically an express application that you can find not only on the SBA website, but also it should be with any of the lending institutions and resources that are out there. The ones that we recommend right now that you work with would be Customers Bank. We also recommend the Enterprise Center. We also recommend Asian Bank. Those are institutions that have reached out to us specifically to be able to provide guidance and direction. So once again, we thank you for your time and consideration. Please let us know. Visit our website. We have an intake form if you have questions, and I'll be happy to get back to you. Enjoy your day. Fill out this application, get some money, and let's get this economy moving. Thanks, everybody. Take care.